Problem number 2 on our rational functions word problem set says, working together, it takes Sam, Jenna, and Francisco 2 hours to paint one room. When Sam works alone, he can paint a room in 6 hours. When Jenna works alone, she can paint a room in 4 hours. How long will it take? Figure out how long it will take Francisco to paint one room on his own. So this is, I'm going to do this in the problem journal again. So this is a rational function word problem. And just going to go through the same process that I like to go through when I'm solving a word problem. The first thing I want to try to figure out is, what am I trying to find? And I'm trying to find the time, and I'm going to call that t, that Francisco can paint one room. How long does it take for him to paint one room? And this whole problem, the unit of time in all the things that they're reporting to us in this problem is hours. So I'm going to try to find the time for Francisco to paint one room in hours. So I did a little thinking about my units before I really get into this problem. And next, I need a relationship. And this is a rate problem. It's not a rate of speed problem, but it's a work problem in the sense that so I'm gonna use R, and I'm gonna think about this as the number of rooms you can paint, a person can paint in a certain number of hours. So it looks just like our other rate problem, but the units are a little different. This is the number of rooms, and this is how many hours it takes. And before I move forward, I also just want to remind you that sometimes it makes sense to look at this problem in a different way. And I can multiply both sides of this by t, and I can transform this relationship into r times t equals n. And that might come in handy later. Of course, I can even keep going and say that t equals n over r, and maybe that'll make sense. But I just wanted to remind you that this is kind of flexible once we come up with this relationship. So I'm going to think about each of these people: Sam, Jenna, and Francisco. Now, Sam has his own special rate of painting a room, and I'm going to call that R sub S, and that's his rate, the rate for Sam. I just need to differentiate between the speed at which Sam and Jenna and Francisco each paint rooms. So they really each have their own rate, and Francisco has his own rate. And for Sam, he can paint one room in 6 hours. And for Jenna, she can paint one room in 4 hours. So that's a higher rate. And Francisco, we don't know. He can paint one room in t hours. And that's the thing we're looking for. So I know that working for 2 hours, when each of them works for 2 hours, and then we combine whatever work they accomplished, it's going to add up to one room. And that's why I wanted to look at the equation this way for a minute. If I take the rate and I multiply by those 2 hours, then that's the number of rooms that they can paint in 2 hours. So let me just add it together. Sam can paint 1/6 of a room per hour, and I'm going to multiply that by 2. So I get 2/6. And he can paint 2/6 of a room in 2 hours. Jenna can paint 2/4 of a room or half a room in 2 hours. I could reduce these, but I'm going to need a common denominator in a minute anyway, so I'll just leave them like this. Francisco, we know that he can paint one room in t hours, and so the amount if he works for 2 straight hours, he can paint 2 over t rooms. And when I add all this together, I know that I should get one room, and I'll even write that as a rational number so I can be sure to remember my common denominator. So from here, I need a common denominator, and I notice that 6 and 4 go into 12. So I can write this as 4/12 plus 6/12 plus 24/12, and I got to keep my t on the bottom here, and that equals 12/12. I don't quite have a common denominator because I need a t in all of my other rational expressions, a t on the bottom. And the way I get that is I multiply top and bottom by t, multiply top and bottom by t, multiply top and the bottom by t. And there, I found a common denominator for all 4 of these rational expressions. So I can keep going now and just take the numerators there. If I multiply through by 12t, then I'll be just left with 4t plus 6t plus 24, and that's going to equal 12t. And this is a pretty simple linear equation to solve. Combining like terms, 10t plus 24 equals 12t. And let me subtract the 10t from both sides. 24 equals 2t. And finally, dividing both sides by 2, I get t equals 12 hours. And that is my answer. And just to be rigorous, I'm going to go through and label each of these things, each of these steps, just to justify what it is that I've done. So here, I've just added 2 hours of work for each painter. And that's how I composed my equation. And then I found a common denominator. And then I came down here and I used the multiplicative property of equality to multiply through by 12t and cancel out all those denominators. Combine like terms. And then this is from the subtractive property of equality. I subtracted 10t from both sides, and then the division property of equality gave me my answer. I divided both sides of this equation by 2. And I just added my units at the end so that my answer contained the units as well.